Hello and welcome to Green Pass Gaming's chat review of Resident Evil 8. I am Flap and we've got the full GPG crew with us tonight. It's Luke Steele, Puxley and Scott. Guys, how are we doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Thanks, yeah.
Excellent.
Good, thank you very much, Flap.
So, new series. We thought we'd give this a go. We'd thought we'd chat review Resident Evil 8. It came out last Friday, so it's quite new out. And we thought we'd just have a bit of a chat about the game. Luke and I have both played it. Pux and Scott haven't played it, so I thought it was quite a good idea just to have a chat about the game and to give our thoughts and opinions and to just give it a bit of a review, really. I'm kind of playing live, so the guys can ask me questions. But so better start off, really. Did anyone play the demo?
Yes, I played the demo. I really enjoyed it, actually, as well.
Okay.
Well, that was a shame it was time limited.
Yes, I think you was limited to an hour, wasn't you?
Yes, that was to do both the castle and the village sections. So to be fair, they weren't that long anyway, but because you knew, at least for me in the back of my mind, because I knew there was a time limit, I was kind of half consciously rushing it, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't have the chance to play the demo, to be honest. I remember, what I remember reading about it was quite, not just time limit, but was it only available during certain hours of a certain day, or did they change that later on? Was that just sort of the initial demo?
I think that was changed last minute. Yeah, originally, as you say, it was like a day's worth of time or something, and then I think because a lot of people complained about it by the sounds of it, and they extended it by a week. So you had a week to play it, but then within that week, you still only had the 1 hour time limit.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. I remember reading about. I think because they did the whole PlayStation 5 or PlayStation just exclusive demo for a timed period, which I thought was a bit strange. So I never ended up checking it out because I couldn't really be bothered with figuring out when it needed to fit in my schedule.
No, fair enough. Luke, I mean, you've played the game. Was it the demo that convinced you, or was you always going to get this? Are you a Resi fan?
Yeah, I mean, I played the demo, but I was always going to buy it. I'm a super fan of Resident Evil. I've played and finished every Resident Evil there's ever been, probably multiple times, most of them.
So how do you feel this one stacks up?
Really well. The demo I really loved, and then I got the game. It's got a bit of a slow start, and I wasn't sure, how it was going to stack up overall. Especially compared to 7, which is obviously a big departure for the series in terms of perspective, etc. But then once you kind of get past that, which is about an hour long, and you get into the meat and bones of the game, it far surpasses, I think, a lot of what 7 does within the first probably 5 or 6 hours. It's a really wonderful experience.
I think once you get to the castle and you start running around there, that's when it all starts opening up. And but it's a proper Resident Evil game. Are you much of a Resi fan, Scott?
Not so much. Certainly not as much as Luke seems to be. I played some of the earlier games. I skipped 5, 6. I played a little bit of 7, but after maybe about halfway through, maybe not even that, I kind of fell off that game a little bit. There was just something about that didn't really grab us. I really enjoyed the first couple of hours. I think sort of the opening scenes. I thought the tension in that was great. Some of the jump scares were fun in the way that jump scare can be. But then it got to a certain element where it just kind of didn't really click with me anymore, and I kind of fell off about halfway through.
Okay. Well, this, as like I say, it's a typical Resident Evil game. It does that thing where you've only ever just about got enough ammo, meds, all of that kind of stuff. It's so well balanced with that kind of thing. I've played it through on normal, and I found it relatively easy, to be honest. I didn't die that many times. There's a few little cutscenes where you don't know what you're doing at first, and you have to die a couple of times before you work it out. But again, typical kind of Resident Evil, I guess. But you much of a Resi fan, Pux?
I am, but I haven't been a big follower of it. Nowhere near to the extremes as Luke, for example. But one thing to bear in mind, at least, I mean, when the first set of games came out and really gained that popularity, I think I was only about 7 or 8 years old. So even if I wanted to play it, I probably would have been equipping myself, playing them as a young scaredy cat kid. So, but I have definitely gotten into them as I've gotten older. I think I mean, Luke's gonna probably have a go at me on this one, but my kind of first proper foray into buying a Resi game and playing it and loving it was actually Resident Evil 5. But then I'm also aware that that's the game which kind of went action more than horror. And I was aware that it was a horror game, so I was a little bit disappointed when I did play it for the first time and it wasn't really scary at all. But I think, especially a lot more recently, about 2 years ago, I bought the Resident Evil 2 remake on PS4. And holy cow, I absolutely love the game. Because of my age, way back when the originals came out, they've completely passed me by. So playing it again, playing the remake again was fantastic. And I remember playing the demo as well for Resident Evil 7. That's right, isn't it? Yeah, 7. Yeah, the first one of this set. I absolutely love that one. Again, it's one of those games that I never have really had the time during that time to purchase it. But now that this game's come out, I'm actually quite tempted to go back and play 7 via Game Pass first, and then come back to this one, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they do. They do follow on, don't they? Actually, Luke.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, it's probably worth playing 7, or you know, if you really can't be bothered, go and have a look at the story. They're all connected, the Resident Evils, in some way, but obviously 8 is a proper direct follow-on of 7. So you know, I'm not saying go and play Resident Evil first to 6. Definitely don't play 6. But yeah, it's got a really storied and checkered history, Resident Evil, because you know, Bugsy was saying about you know, Resident Evil 5, you know, kind of moving away from the horror stuff, and that wasn't actually that bad. I mean, 5 kind of, you know, bolted onto 4 in terms of they'd found this kind of new direction where you had this kind of this horror backdrop, but it was a bit over the top, right? And it was a bit kind of actiony. But 6 really kind of screwed the pooch, so to speak, because they realized that, you know, people wanted they wanted Resident Evil to be scary and have horror and tension, but some people also really liked the action, and others wanted a bit of both. And what they ended up doing was creating 6, which had essentially 3 separate campaigns, and all that were intermingled, I should say. And 1 was just basically all action, kind of third-person shootery. 1, which followed Leon Kennedy, was a bit more horror kind of oriented to the survival horror element, and then the third one was a mix of both, but it was just a disaster. It was a total mess. It didn't give anyone what they wanted, and so when you got into 7, you know, they essentially did a complete reboot of the series, not just from perspective, obviously that was the big thing, right, that it went first person, but also that they kind of went way back to their roots and said, okay, let's make it a survival horror game. Let's make it classic Resident Evil, but you know, in a modern setting, with a modern engine, in first person. And then they also had some of these really schlocky B-movie, you know, over-the-top action set pieces, but they worked really well. And one of the things Flap, I think, Village does really well is it has a really great balance of really kind of terrifying horror bits, but also these really epic kind of like boss battles or these, you know, huge fights, you know, kind of moments, and you're always on the edge, as you say. You've never quite got enough resource to deal with it properly. So I think he does that extremely well.
He does. And like I say, there's been a few times you think, I am so low on health or ammo, and somehow you just kind of scrape through it, and it does really well at just doing that kind of feeling where you just scrape through every kind of encounter that you have. But what do we make of it graphically then, guys? Because I've got to be honest, I was absolutely blown away. I don't know if this video is actually doing it justice as I'm capturing it on OBS, but on an OLED 4K telly, it absolutely blows me away. Graphically, it's fantastic. You're playing it on PC, actually, aren't you, Luke?
I am, yes. I'm playing it at 4K with ray tracing. Everything's up to max, and it's a stunning game. It's definitely one of the best looking games of this generation. If you want to call it that, which is even more impressive because it's a cross-gen game, of course.
No, absolutely, and this is running on the Series X. This has got ray tracing turned on. It runs a fairly flawless 60. There's a Digital Foundry video on that. I've tried to make this as spoiler-free as I can. This is early on in the video, so there's nothing here that's really much of a spoiler if you are watching. But so you're not convinced then, Scott? You don't think you'd go for this?
I guess it depends really. So a couple of questions I guess I've got from you, because what I'm seeing here does remind me so much of Resident Evil 7 from what I played. So I guess a question for you guys is, I guess bigger Resident Evil fans, do you prefer the first person more? Do you prefer do you think that that's the way that they should continue doing this franchise in first person, or would you ever like to see a return to third?
I saw a Twitter poll on that. And most people voted that they preferred first person, which I do personally. But I'm a first person shooter kind of guy, to be honest. So this was always going to be my kind of home, as it were. I'm used to that. But what's your take, Luke?
Yeah, I think I mean, you know, as a huge fan of it, I was very skeptical when 7 was going first person. Not because I don't like first person perspectives, but I think a lot of people were very worried. Okay, we're going even further away from Resident Evil, you know, is traditionally. But actually, it works really well for a couple of reasons. One, that it's very immersive, which for a horror game is, you know, really
absolutely.
Important. So it does that extremely well, and also they haven't compromised any of the principles of Resident Evil. You know, like the great Resident Evils, Resident Evil 2, you know, 4, etc. In that it's a proper survival horror game. So it feels, oddly enough, it feels just like Resident Evil, you know, 2 remake, 4, 3, any of those, except for the fact that it's first person, right? I think that's it. So, I mean, I suspect what they will keep going down this path of the main entry games being first person, and I'm sure that no doubt they're going to remake something like 4 for people who want that third person stuff again.
It certainly makes it more immersive, and again, trying to avoid spoilers, but this happens in lots of games, but there's a few games where you're getting chased, and just being in first person just adds to the whole fear factor, to be honest. It's not high on jump scares, though, is it? You know, lots of people that don't like horror games, I think it's the jump scare side of things that people tend to not like, but it's not big on jump scares.
No, I wouldn't say it. It does have some. It had one in particular that really got me the other day, which...
That makes me so nervous.
I won't spoil, but it was actually in relation, Flap kind of skirting around it. It was in relation to a puzzle. You kind of figuring out a puzzle, and then suddenly there's something that happens. So that really got me to the point where my partner kind of shut up and came in the room to be like, "What's going on?" So yeah, it's not a big on jump scares. I mean, there are some, but it's really good at having this kind of foreboding, unsettling atmosphere. And as Flat will know, there's one area in particular of the game that is
proper messed up,
really messed up, really terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's less said about that, the better.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm looking at here, Flat, what I'm noticing that maybe one of the differences, particularly from sort of the early hours of Resident Evil 7, I think this is obviously fairly early in the game, and already you're sort of out in, well, obviously the village, I assume, but it's kind of a little bit more open at this point. And early on in Resident Evil 7, it feels maybe a little claustrophobic because you're kind of stuck in that house for such a large portion of the game, if I'm remembering it correctly. I know you do eventually leave that at some point, but kind of early on, obviously in this game, you kind of the game or the world's kind of opened up quite a bit already, it seems.
Yeah, I think it's very well paced, and there's certain sections that you go through, and they just feel very well paced. And like you say, it's never claustrophobic for too long. There are elements where you're inside and you're kind of running corridors, but there are also other elements where, like you say, as you can see, you're outside. And the thing that I really liked about this, Luke, was you can see things in the background. There is like a windmill like that over there. And at some point in the story, you get to visit all of these places, and it's fantastic. And you can obviously see the castle up there.
It's really good at that. It's got this really great visual design. Everything's kind of queued up quite nicely for you, and as you say, Flat, I know to harp on with the old sayings, if you see that mountain, you can go there, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But you really can in this, like, the castle is a full castle. It's properly explorable. You go there, and as you say, there's places like the windmill area and all of this. It feels very, very interconnected. And also, there's no loading screens at all in any of this. So you load the game up, and everything is seamless. Which is really impressive. Again, for a cross-gen game, right? It's not taking advantage of everything the new consoles can do, etc. So it's very impressive.
Have you guys seen any other reviews of it? Because it's reviewing quite well, and in fact, I think it's been selling pretty well. I think it's the second highest box game in the UK at the moment. It's got the normal sort of puzzles, as you can see.
Yeah, so regarding reviews, I've recently been looking to these over the last day or two, and I think even this morning on pushsquare.com, there's plenty of reviews out there saying how fantastic the game is and how much it's sold. I think in the couple of days it's been out, it's already sold about 3 million copies worldwide, I believe.
Yeah.
Which again, for such a small time frame, that's fantastic, right? I mean, so many people have jumped to this game just for the hype around it, I think, as well. And I think, but I do wonder if many people are picking this up because a lot of the reviews have also said that this game is not quite as jump scary or horrifying as what 7 is. So I kind of feel that maybe more people will be jumping on with that comfort, knowing that they're not going to be scared too much, if that makes sense.
This one's got kind of weird and wacky monsters in it. It really is creepy, but in just a different way. I think 7 tends to play on the human element, whereas this is just out and out monsters and stuff. So
it's quite fascinating, though, isn't it? Because they are similar graphics wise, 7 and 8. Yet you'd think that knowing that it's a game and whatever else that shouldn't matter. But it just goes to show how well the game is designed, right? To the fact that people know that not only are you in these really small claustrophobic spaces within this house, that just because of the fact it's a person or people coming after you somehow makes it multiple times more terrifying than knowing that there's some weird, I don't know, werewolf demon or something behind you, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
To the design, definitely.
Yeah,
well,
and sorry, Flap, you go ahead.
No, go on.
No, I was gonna. Fun about this, I guess, was that this wasn't intended to be Resident Evil 8. This setting was, and the kind of monsters around it. Even for Resident Evil, it's pretty wacky. But this started development actually as Resident Evil Revelations 3, which is an offshoot of Resident Evil, kind of a third-person, more classic-ish Resident Evil series. But apparently, when Capcom started testing it internally and getting people on it, who were fans of the series, etc., the feedback was so good, was just overwhelmingly positive. They decided, okay, let's actually move this into the main franchise. Let's change it. They did have to change, perspective and all that kind of stuff, and a lot of the story elements to get it to build in. But and this is what we have now. This is the big Resident Evil. So,
well, in conclusion, what do we think, then, gents? Perhaps me and Luke go last. Scott. Has this convinced you in any different sort of way?
It has, actually. I think just seeing it being a little bit more open, I think it just this final scene actually has just come up there. That looked freaky as hell, like that little weird mini doll.
Trust
person.
Me, it gets worse than that.
Yeah. I think also one of the things that I've heard, and it would be great to hear from you guys as well, is just how long it is. It doesn't seem like it overstays its welcome. From what I've read, it seems to be like obviously a good length game, but not, kind of like a 20, 30 or 40 hour sort of game as well, which is quite appealing as well.
I've put in 8.5 hours, and I feel like I'm near the end. But they have been very, very enjoyable hours. They really have. It's been quality content the whole way. Not frustrating. Sometimes games do this thing where they just pad it out and it gets a little bit frustrating. No, every moment of this has felt worthwhile, and that you're driving the story forward. It's fantastic.
You're the one who's arguing with Miranda's decision.
Pux, are you going to get this?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I've got other commitments, unfortunately, so I won't be able to jump on this straight away. But this is definitely something I'd like to pick up as soon as I can in the near future. 100%.
Yeah, I'd recommend it for anyone that has seen the visuals, watched other reviews, heard what we've said, think that they may enjoy it. I think you would. It's £55 in the UK at the moment. I think PlayStation 5 £60. I also heard an interesting fact. I think in the UK, the boxed versions that were sold, I think 30% sold on Xbox, 49% sold on PlayStation 5. I'm guessing the others were PC perhaps, but I heard that earlier. It's quite interesting. Luke, what's your roundup of the game then?
Well, I'm biased, but I think it's brilliant. As a massive fan, I tend to actually be a bit more critical of them than other people actually, because I've experienced it all, the highs and lows of the series. So, but I think with this one in particular, this is one a bit like Resident Evil Remake 2. That it's really easy to recommend to people who aren't necessarily fans of Resident Evil, or that haven't had maybe the best experiences, because it's got a really good blend of action and horror, and the hours really do fly by. It doesn't overstay its welcome. There's never a section of the game where you think, oh man, this is, I'm kind of bored of this now. It kind of introduces fresh stuff at you, surprising things. It's horrifying, it's quite funny at times, there's good action, and it looks fantastic, and I really would suggest you, if you can, go and pick it up. 'Cause it's
No, I completely agree. Anyone that wants a graphical showcase for the new generation or next generation console, be it PS5, Xbox Series X, even Series S to a certain degree, if you turn off ray tracing, it's got a pretty solid 60 frames a second, which is pretty phenomenal really.
As two guys that have played it, what would you both give it out of 10, just to give it an actual rating?
Ooh. Can we do 0.5s? I'll do 8.5.
Nice.
Yeah, I'd as it stands, I'd give it a 9.
So definitely a must-buy then.
Yeah, this comes GPG recommended. Excellent.
Slap
Well,
a big sticker on there.
exactly. We'll have to let Capcom know that it's GPG approved, and they can stick the stickers on the box. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been an absolute pleasure. Anyone that's watching, thank you for watching. Hopefully this has helped you make your decision one way or the other. And from myself and the rest of the GPG crew, Luke Steele, Puxley and Scott, thank you for watching, and we will see you on the next one.